We're going to investigate what we can about Sputnik's orbits. And it was launched on 4th of October 1957, the first ever artificial satellite from a launch pad in what is now Kazakhstan, but was then the Soviet Union. And the satellite was housed in the nose cone of a rocket, the R7 rocket, which was going to launch the satellite into its required altitude and orbit. And there had been lots of other rockets before. The first liquid-fueled rocket was designed by Robert Goddard 51 years earlier. And you can look at the world map, look at the globe, just to see where it was launched in what is now the Baikonur Cosmodrome, and was then the Soviet Union. And it was called the Artificial Earth Satellite, but became known as Sputnik. And the Soviet Union gave it the name of PS1 for the launch that it was, but it became known as Sputnik. And you can see it there written in the Russian Cyrillic script. And it was designed to be noticed, and its orbit's important there. It's going to cover most of the world's populated landmass, and its radio transmission, announcing it's there on wavelengths that could be heard, and a design that's shiny, difficult to see, but just and certainly with binoculars. And so if we're looking at a single Sputnik orbit, here it's launched going around the world, but because of the rotation of the Earth, the orbit is then shifted to the west. And each orbit took just over 90 minutes at a speed at 18,000 miles per hour. That's 8 kilometers, best part of 5 miles a second. And where was its orbit? You can see that it's in the upper atmosphere, the exosphere, and it was a range, so it wasn't always at one altitude. It was an elliptical orbit as well, and you can read those as the closest to the Earth and then the furthest away. And then with subsequent orbits, moving across the world's surface, it's going to cover most of the populated lands. And 1,200 miles shift each orbit, and obviously lots of them. And the orbit, or where it was in the orbit, could be seen from the ground, but it needed to be a dark night with no outside light pollution and as little moonlight as you could have. And the observer would have to know where to look, but more easily seen with binoculars and, of course, telescope. So 1,440 orbits over a period of 92 days, which ended as the orbit degraded, as the power sources were failing, and it entered the Earth's atmosphere. And here you see 70 million kilometers were traveled. And anything that comes back into the Earth's atmosphere will actually glow intense heat because of friction with the air particles in the outer atmosphere, causing rapid and intense temperature rises. And this is a NASA test of the ablative shield on a Mercury program capsule, which was used for the first American manned spaceflight just a few years after Sputnik had flown. But Sputnik didn't have any ablative shield. The outer heat layer was a millimeter thick, and as Sputnik reaches the outer atmosphere, the friction caused the intense heating, and following that, disintegration, breakup, burning up, and nothing would have reached the ground. Now you can see the effect with Sputnik in the news the day after. You can look at those links both for New York Times and the Russian Pravda. And here is an artist impression of Sputnik that was actually done for the 50th anniversary in 2007. The effect of Sputnik included education with an Education Act, and it was determined that Russians were studying more science than in the West, and it promoted significant changes. And you can pause on this to see links, particularly the start of the space race. There were already missions planned, and the Vanguard in 1958, so a few months after Sputnik being launched in the US. But you can see how this accelerated the space race with the links that are here. And some, is it popular culture, seeing Sputnik's orbit on stamps and other materials.